Good morning. This year on July 30th, Eid al-Adha, a Muslim holy day, will begin its celebration. We have a friend in the neighborhood from the interfaith community, and she and I had a conversation. I want to thank Naseem Ali for discussing her experiences as a Muslim woman for this holiday. I hope you enjoy getting to know a little bit more about Eid al-Adha. In the creation of heavens and earth, and in the succession of night and day, there are signs for all of us to find understanding. Those that remember the ultimate, the divine, God, the universe, when standing, sitting, lying down, can reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth, saying, as this quote from the Quran reminds us, "Lord, you have not created these in vain. Glory be to you. Save us from the torments of any distractions or fires." As we sit in the midsummer, may we reflect on the beauty of nature and the complexities that each flower holds as it unfolds to reveal its true beauty. May we also hold in these moments the strength that we gather from a variety of sources and resources, and remember that our collective strength holds us as a foundation for community. In peace, in silence, and reflection. Mahud offers these words of thanks and gratitude from the Muslim tradition. In the name of God, the most merciful, the beneficent, O nourisher and provider of all things, we offer our thanks and gratitude for this time as we gather. In a world where so many are hungry for compassion, may we gather with loving and humble hearts. We offer our thanks and gratitude for each member of our community and the opportunity that we have to come together to do good. Dear God, may you bless all our efforts and help us to be fully present with one another, mindful of our purpose. In the name of God and with the blessings of God, let us begin. So today we are going to learn a little bit about a holy day that is celebrated in the Muslim community called Eid al-Adha. It is one of the more important holidays of the lunar year that the Muslims celebrate. This year it starts on July 30th and ends on August 3rd, 2020. Each year is a different date because of the lunar calendar. It's the 10th day of the last month on the Muslim calendar. Our friend from the Interfaith group of Farmington, Nasim Ali, spoke with her imam from a mosque on Orchard Lake called Anjuman-e-Najmi, and answered a lot of questions that I had about this holiday. As we get to know our neighbors and their beliefs, we, each of us, take another step towards peace and understanding. Some of you know information about the Muslim community and their religion. Some of you know more about Muhammad than others. I am just going to give a brief background. Muhammad, as the founder of the Islamic religion, was born in about 570 AD. He was raised by his uncle. He had some probable early contact with Christianity on a trading journey to Syria. In fact, some of you may have been studying how the trade routes affected the world religions and their spread. He was married at 25 to a wealthy woman that was 15 years older than him. He led a very pious life. But then in his 40s, during a period that he devoted to meditation, he retreated to a cave, it is said, at Mount Hira, and he spent time there prayer and fasting. Here is where the angel Gabriel visited him and gave him the first verses of the Quran, the holy book of Islam. He was told to carry that message to the world and that there was only one God and no others. And this is where many will connect us, if you will, to the Muslim and the Judaic traditions, because as Unitarians, una, for those that believe in God or a higher power, believe in one God rather than Trinitarian. He spoke, Muhammad did, his beliefs in private, and then he started to receive more verses of the Quran. He devoted his writings to those verses, and that became the holy book of Islam. As in 625, when he approached Mecca, he had accumulated many men that would stand up to the resistance of creating a religion with values and morals from the lessons that he had received from God. He died in Medina in 632. Now this is where some of the curiosity starts for many of us that are just maybe novices in learning about the Muslim religion is that there's been a dispute over Muhammad's successor. When Muhammad died, the great dispute that arose was that the leader of the new religion should be somebody within his bloodline. And so some of that dispute ended up in being called the Way. The followers of the Way, the Sunnah, the Sunni Muslims, believed that Muhammad's father-in-law and friend Abu Bakr would take control. Others believed that only someone with within Muhammad's family would be the rightful leader. The camp followed the cousin and son-in-law Ali ibn Abi Talib, and they became known as the party of Ali, or the Shiite Muslims. And so when we hear the different descriptions of the Muslim religion, that is the connection of who would take over generation after generation to lead the Muslims. But today we're going to focus on this holiday of Eid al-Adha. It's interesting that a few years ago we attended one of the larger churches out in Troy, Michigan, and they were actually enacting this particular story. At first glance, it may seem like an upsetting story. There's some suspense, there's some violence, there's some intrigue, there's some, what in the world would God do this test to somebody for? There's questions that will come up. And I would like you to keep in mind, many of you were raised either Jewish or Christian. Many of our stories from those two world religions also would have violence, intrigue. Why did God put us to those tests? And so for us to keep that mind of curiosity around this holiday is important. Eid is one of the 4 holiest nights of the year in the Muslim tradition. 4 nights which extra prayers and devotions are encouraged. And so it is based on the story of God calling to Abraham to test his devotion and loyalty and asking him to bring his son Ishmael to a particular spot and sacrifice him. If you so love me, Abraham, to the degree that I demand, and you have the devotion and loyalty to me, you will sacrifice your son. You can imagine the angst that Abraham would go through in making this decision. But he discussed this with his son, who was probably about 6 or 8 years old, and he brought his son to the designated space, and he was supposed to kill him, but instead God granted him the favor of killing a sheep or a ram instead, and said, Abraham, you are devoted to me. You would have made the sacrifice. I grant you to have your son live with you for a long time. Now, it's very interesting that that story refers to the son as Ishmael. The Christians believe that it was Isaac, and Abraham had the same test, only it was of God's will around the son Isaac rather than Ishmael, those two being brothers. And the Christian story comes from Genesis 22, 1 through 19. Now, within the Christian tradition, of course, then it isn't just Abraham being tested for his sacrifice. It's that Jesus comes along as the promised Son of God and continues God's will in saving humanity through the grace of Jesus and believing in Jesus. So those two stories are very similar, but they have different outcomes, with Jesus being the continuing story for Christians. And so back to our Muslim friends. Why would we want anyone to celebrate year after year after year such a story of putting a father to such a test of sacrificing for God's loyalty? Well, the Muslims believe that this value of self-sacrifice for others is very important. In fact, I was kind of thinking of it in a more lighthearted way. It's become the custom in the last few years that our teens and our young people and us, we take selfies all the time. But here, God is not demanding or asking for a selfie. He's asking for a group photo. He's asking for a sacrifice, not just what is important for me or I, but what is necessary for we. As the sacrifice was made of that sheep or lamb, what was given to Abraham as a direction is that you would take a third of that meat and you would keep it for your own home. You would take the next third and offer it to the family and friends that you would gather, because the value of family and friends connecting together and keeping close family ties and celebrating the Word of God and the practice of God was important. And then the third portion of the sheep or lamb would be given to those in need. And so that sacrifice ends up not just being a sacrifice or a loyalty, but a connection to community and to values that are important for the core for civilization to continue. And so that sacrifice, of course, starting with the third for the family, this is a celebration where rice and bread and special treats are served, and people's houses are cleaned up, and it's almost like what we would do. I would say not for Christmas, I would say more for Easter. I would compare this holiday in our minds, we could wrap our heads around it for Easter, because Jesus sacrificed his life for all of humanity. Abraham made this sacrifice. God gave Abraham his son back, and that core family value, celebrations that actually last a week, and special prayers. And so Muhammad encouraged socialization for the health of all people, atonement, at one with God. And so all of these connections of values come into play. You cannot have family without having obedience to God. And once you have obedience to God, then you also have obedience to your parents, your grandparents, and your elders. People come in from all areas of the country to celebrate with their families during this time. So what could we do as non-Muslims to help Muslims have a time to acknowledge this special holiday? We could be sensitive to the fact that they're having larger gatherings, and maybe if you're in management, you could give some time off. We could be sensitive to the people that are celebrating this holiday in a prayer state during the day, and just be kinder. We could actually say, may you have a wonderful Eid, and that's all you have to remember. They used to send cards, actually. They still have some Ramadan cards sometimes that you will see, and they used to send cards for Eid, but now usually they just offer a verbal blessing. This teaching of sacrifice is very important. The social interaction is very important. The connections that we have with our neighbors are very important. And so these extra prayers that are said also will be including us. And after sunrise, that's when the group usually gets together, and in the mosque, the women pray separately from the men. But this year, there's going to be a new twist, right? Because of the COVID virus, they will be Zooming their Eid prayers. And so that is going to be a different connection for them than normally gathering in large groups. One of the pillars, the five pillars of the Islamic religion, is to offer alms. And so this offering of alms at this time becomes the offering of that sheep. As we look to how we can understand other people's faith, it is wonderful just to ask questions. And how you ask questions with that curiosity is important. Nasim and I had a lovely conversation out in the memorial garden at our church. She was so pleased and generous with her conversation, and just really humbled that somebody would want to know the details around this special holiday that some of you may have heard of, but I've never heard of. It is often called the Feast of the Sacrifice. And this is, there's another important piece that I just want to throw in closing. This often happens at the end of Hajj. And so when Muslim people take their pilgrimage to Mecca, they walk around for miles and miles and miles together in the heat, and they offer their, usually it's once in a lifetime Hajj, or this retreat that they make, but it is a great sacrifice of finances, and they sleep in tents all around in Mecca. I had this idea that as an American I would have been comfortable in staying in a motel, but that isn't the case. It's a very humble retreat approach, and it's a big sacrifice for them. This Eid happens at the end of many people's Hajj and their retreat to Mecca. So I would like to close with a poem from Rumi. I'd also like to tell you that yes, Rumi was Muslim, but he was within the, I want to say, spiritual, mystical side of the Muslim religion. And when I asked Nasim, she said yes, Rumi is definitely acknowledged, and his words are acceptable and affirmed within their tradition. So this is called God's Garden. Lord, the air smells good today, straight from the mysteries within the garden of God. The trees in their prayer, the birds in praise, the blue violets kneeling.